All right, welcome everybody. Happy Thursday. We're so happy to see you on screen here today. My name is Helen Blyer. I serve as the director of the Center for Lifelong Learning at Columbia Theological Seminary, and I have the delight, the privilege of leading a fabulous group of people who provide executive direction for ALM, the Association of Leaders in Lifelong Learning for Ministry. You'll be meeting one of those good folks in just a moment. Alam is the community of practice, think tank, resource provider, and advocate for those who lead lifelong learning for ministry programs. We cast a very broad net. Our members include those across theological schools, denominational offices, and freestanding lifelong learning providers. And while our members are largely Christian because of the nature of the industry, they are not exclusively so, and we work to serve all people who are extending the ecosystem of theological education, broadly speaking, into areas outside of formalized degree programs and credit-bearing offerings. If you feel like you'd appreciate conversation partners who get the distinctiveness of the work you do, and don't want to have to explain yourself over and over again, think about joining us. Joining us, becoming a member, also means that you're part of the support, creation, and provision of resources for all of us who do this work. And we encourage you to be a part of this community. We're going to provide you with information at the end of the webinar on how to become a member if you aren't already. It's our pleasure to offer this series of monthly webinars on topics that are related to the work of lifelong learning for everyone who is interested, free of charge. Today's topic seems particularly timely, digging into the challenge of student learning assessment in the midst of AI's influence on the work of education. Next month, we're going to be looking at adaptive versus technical change on March 10th at 3 o'clock with Tay Moss. We will once again, of course, be communicating that webinar through the ATS listserv and through the Alum membership. Now to our guest today, Lindsay Andreolli-Comstock. She's going to be leading our conversation. She's co-founder and managing director of Tumbu Global, an international educational design and executive consulting firm, and she's president and principal consultant for the School of Global Citizenry, an online global citizenship education school of lifelong learning. And I'm pleased to say she serves and has served for quite some time on the exec of Olive. We've definitely benefited from her creativity and energy. Lindsay, we're so glad to have you here today. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Helen. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Impact as Currency. We're going to be looking at proving your program's indispensability with educational taxonomies. As Helen has already said, I have had the great privilege of being part of ALUM for the last number of years, serving on the exec committee. And I can tell you, I've been on a lot of committees and boards over the years, and there's very few, I think, sometimes that we learn as much from as that we contribute to. And I feel like I have benefited so greatly from being part of this incredible guild of folks who are doing such incredible work in the world. And you all are representatives of that. So I'm glad that you're here today. Just a little bit more about me. For those of you who happen to represent ATS member schools, because I see a couple of you here, we're also a partner organization at Tumbu with ATS, and we've been offering educational design consulting for Pathways for Tomorrow grantees since about 2023. And we just launched yesterday 6 new free consulting offerings for all those with active Lilly grants. So I would encourage you after the webinar to hit up tumbuglobal.org and check those out, and feel free to take advantage of them. They are there for you and they are free. But in addition to theological schools, we work with denominations and judicatories and churches. We also work with government training entities like HUD and God bless it when USAID existed, as well as nonprofits. So it's really an honor to be with you because you all are really the feet on the ground doing the good work. I would like to begin today by putting a question on the screen for you that I believe sits at the heart of our work as leaders in lifelong learning for ministry. I want you to take a minute when you see this question. I want you to read it to yourself, and I want you to really consider how and if it speaks to your current situation. Okay? Here's your question. If your budget was cut by 20% tomorrow, do you have the pedagogical evidence to show why your lifelong learning program is indispensable to the future of the church? Or if not your budget, if all of the staff and administration who currently support your lifelong learning efforts were to somehow be let go tomorrow and new staff were hired, do you have the pedagogical evidence to show them why your program is indispensable to the future of the church? At our last gathering of leaders in lifelong learning for ministry in Atlanta, hosted by Columbia, hosted by Alam, which was just a month or so ago now, right? Not too long. I heard one story repeatedly, right at the bottom of every conversation I was having. And that was that many directors are being asked to prove the worth of their programs to their stakeholders or to defend their expenses. Or they're being asked to generate their own funds outside of the budget of the larger institution because it's already been decided that their department in this financial crunch is not a top priority. In a landscape like lifelong learning, where we are not conferring degrees, but rather offering this game-changing continuing education that's non-degree and non-credit bearing, we all know that the rules are a little bit different, right? We currently do not have an accrediting body. We are not held to a particular standard, or we don't even have a standardized way to assess our programs. That reality, alongside the fact that we are often asked to defend our expenses more often than other departments, means that for programs like ours, success is commonly measured by things like this: enrollment numbers in our programs, clicks on links in courses to show engagement, or by how many positive satisfaction surveys or positive course evaluations we can generate at the end of a learning experience. And while these metrics are good, they're not great. And they don't always translate the way we want them into a clear, compelling answer as to why our programs are truly indispensable. So today, we're going to discuss how to measure transformation by building the pedagogical evidence needed to ensure that our lifelong learning programs are not just relevant, but that are seen by our stakeholders as essential to the future of the church. Whoops, I went the wrong way. For virtual interaction today, I'm going to be using something called a waterfall chat. Has anybody ever used a waterfall chat before? You can just raise your hand and kind of wave it around. Okay. You probably have heard it called by something else, or maybe you've never done it before at all, but essentially it's a virtual facilitation technique used to capture a collective burst of ideas simultaneously while ensuring that every voice is heard. So each time it will happen the same way. I will ask a specific question. You will type your response into the chat window for everyone to see, but then you will pause before pressing enter. And then on my cue, 3, 2, 1, go, we're all going to press enter at the same time. And what's going to happen is we're going to create a waterfall of scrolling responses. You can see a couple of examples here. Different imaginary people. It's just very simple. Yes, no, A, B, C, no explanation needed. And the simplicity is kind of the magic of it all, because it will do a couple of things for us to help us during this time. It will encourage everyone to participate. Doesn't allow any voice to be too loud or too soft. It removes that awkward question of who wants to go first, right? We always ask that question, who wants to go first? And none of us want to be that person. It allows us a quick burst to focus our energies first on responses and then on who said it, which I think sometimes can be interesting. And it also allows us to be vulnerable in community. Now, I don't know about you, but nothing leaves me more raw than offering up something vulnerable and it not being reciprocated, right? And so this is just equal vulnerability, and it will be reciprocated when we all participate. And so nobody has to be out on that ledge alone, okay? So I think we should test our waterfall chat capabilities. What do you think? All right, let's give it a go. Okay, so here is your first question. Are you currently using a taxonomy, Bloom, Fink, Solo, in your lifelong learning program design and development? If so, which one? So it's going to be yes or no. And if you say yes, it's going to be yes, comma, and the name of your taxonomy. So put that into the chat and then pause. And then I'll give you the cue to press enter, okay? I see thinking eyes, so I'm going to keep waiting. All right, everybody ready? Yes? All right, 3, 2, 1, go. Press enter, and boom, look at all that. Look at that. Take a minute and just scroll through. Have a look. Very interesting. All right. It almost looks like we might be 50-50 there. All right, very good. You guys nailed it. Very good. Okay, so let's try one more question. All right. Here is your next waterfall chat question. If asked, could you describe Bloom's or Fink's taxonomy and its benefits to course creation for leaders of lifelong learning? So simple yes or no. All right, everybody ready? All right, I see a thinking face, hold on. 3, 2, 1, go, press enter. All right, everybody have a look.
We're about half
All
and
right.
half, I think.
Yeah, I think we're at 50-50 again. All right, very good. All right, so everybody, I think, has the waterfall chat capability down. Well done, everyone, for your new skill set. So we're going to use that throughout the webinar just to gain some data, learn some things about each other, and also know who we call when we have a question, right? So we'll help each other grow together today. Because we all want our learners to be happy and engaged, right? That's obvious and goes without saying. Positive feedback is great, but when it comes to justifying funding, requesting more resources, or demonstrating our program's unique value, we all know that a stack of positive surveys or positive course evaluations doesn't really say what we want it to. Why? Because that measures sentiment, not learner transformation. Okay, so the danger of relying on sentiment data is that it doesn't describe impact. If a learner enjoys a session but forgets the content by Tuesday and can't apply it on Sunday morning in church, then we haven't actually provided value. We've just provided a temporary learning experience. And in the eyes of a budget committee or some sort of denominational board, satisfaction is a soft metric, right? It's hard to quantify, it's highly subjective, and it doesn't prove that your program is solving a real world problem for the church. When we cannot show competency or in our learners, our departments are often the first to be viewed as optional rather than essential programming. To move our lifelong learning programs from optional to indispensable, we have to change our currency. We need to move from tracking learner satisfaction and in things like enrollment numbers and attendance records and satisfaction surveys and testimonials to tracking learner evidence. This is the difference between asking, did you enjoy the webinar, or even did the course hit home for you, to asking, what did you build because of this webinar? Or what are you doing differently in ministry now after taking our course? If we don't have a formal way to capture this kind of transformation in assessments, we're essentially operating in the dark. We're hoping at that point that our stakeholders just simply take our word for it, that we're changing the world every day and the important work we're doing with the lifelong learning. So that said, I want to pause here and do a quick check-in with another waterfall chat, okay? So again, this is just an opportunity for us to name our current realities. So here is your waterfall chat question. Of the examples I'm about to list for you, what is the primary way you prove the worth of your program to stakeholders? Now, I know it's probably a combination of a number of things, but what is the primary way that you prove. And here are your choices. A, B, C, D, or E. And you want to write other, you can write other. But my guess is maybe it's one of these. Just type it into the chat and pause. So little nuance, it's not the way you're assessing your program, it's the way you're proving the worth of your program to stakeholders. All right, everybody ready? Got a letter in the chat? All right, 3, 2, 1, go. All right, everybody take a look at the chat.
Lots of variety in the responses I see here.
Lots of variety. Very, very interesting. All right, keep having a look at that. And I want to invite maybe two folks to give us some universal observations. I say universal because I don't want you to call anybody out. I want you to look at patterns or trends that you're seeing. What sort of observations do you have? We'll take two folks. And Helen, if you can help maybe see a hand or something and then tell somebody to unmute themselves, that would be super helpful to me.
Yes.
What are you seeing?
You can either unmute and speak, or if you use the raise hand function to be recognized, it should bump you up to the top of my gallery, and I'll view you there.
Excellent. What are you seeing? What does this tell you? The observation I had and keep having is that there's not one letter that seems to be overly dominant. I mean, yes, I could count them, but I don't see a million of this letter. And I'm compelled by the diversity of it all the different ways that we're trying to show that our programs matter in the world.
I'm interested too in the way that the question is phrased. Proving the worth of our program to stakeholders means, how do we talk to our stakeholders in a way that they can hear, which it may mean that they have a different agenda for the program that we're running than we might have as educators or people who intend some kind of transformation.
Absolutely. I see a hand there, Lisa.
I was curious. I would be curious to ask the question the other way, like, because I think you're right. A number of us probably use multiple ABCs there. I wonder which one we use least. I think
that's a good question.
What Helen just said about stakeholders is certainly true for us. We adapt our responses to our audience a little bit, like what the board wants versus what our donors might want. You know what I mean? There's a certain amount of finesse that goes into it, as well as we could do better. But I'd be curious to know if any of these are things we really don't do. Or should, yeah.
Yeah. And that could be a fun question to ask just next after we get through these observations, Lisa. It's very interesting. Anybody else? What are you observing here? I think to Helen's point, it also doesn't assume that we don't have the right information. And to Lisa's point, because we're providing certain information for a particular audience. So it tells us some things, but it makes us wonder other things at the same time. I'm seeing a little bit of response here. Yeah, and some nuances, storytelling strategies, all kinds of stuff. I do see one person acknowledging here that C is used the least, and that's noteworthy as well. I'm interested now because, and I think we have time because of what Lisa has just asked. I'm wondering, could we all type in the thing we use the least? What is the thing we never seem to report to our stakeholders? Type that into the chat, and let's just see what we learn, because that could be very compelling as well. What do you use the least? All right, everybody ready? 3, 2, 1, go. Press enter. Okay. Everybody have a look at the chat and see what you see there. I see a lot of E and a lot of C. Any other observations there? A lot of E, a lot of C. Okay. Thank you for that prompt, Lisa. That was helpful. While it's not 100%, it is clear that many of us are using the numbers game, so A, B, and D, and E, to try to convey to our stakeholders the worth of our programs. But unfortunately, it's not out of bounds to say that in a budget crisis, even good financial numbers can be explained away and satisfaction surveys can be easily dismissed. So then what do we do? Well, if we only track who showed up and who liked our program, then we're treating our programs like commodities, right? But our programs aren't products. Even though we have to market them that way, that's not what they are. They're actually engines of transformation. That's the way I like to think about lifelong learning. So as we move our programs from optional to indispensable in our minds so that we can then have our stakeholders view them that way, we need a higher caliber of evidence to show them, something higher caliber than just numbers. We need to move past sentiment and into what I call pedagogical evidence. We need frameworks that prove people aren't just attending our stuff or even giving money to our programs, but are actually changing because of what we're doing. So to build this evidence, I believe there are two primary frameworks that are already at our fingertips as educators that not only help us on the front end with building our learning objectives, but also on the back end when we need tangible proof of impact. Now, I want to pause right here. I'm going to ask you to write yes or no in the chat. Do you need a basic definition of Bloom's and Finks's taxonomy, or do you feel like you understand them well enough that you want me to go ahead and jump ahead? Just write yes or no in the chat and go ahead and press enter. Just yes or no. Would you like just a basic definition to kind of ground us all? All right, I'm seeing a lot of yes, so that's what I'm going to go with. Or I'm familiar with one with not the other. Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that feedback. So, okay, we're going to look at the two frameworks that I think can create some evidence for us that's not just the numbers game, but some really compelling stuff we can take to our stakeholders. Okay, so the first is Bloom's taxonomy. Probably more familiar to a lot of folks. It's an educational framework developed by Benjamin Bloom in 1956. It was later revised in 2001. And it classifies educational learning objectives into 6 cognitive levels of increasing complexity. So you can see it there. Remember is kind of not least complex, and it goes up to create, gets more and more complex as you go up Bloom's staircase, okay? So it's used to structure curriculum, assessments, learning activities to ensure students move beyond simple memorization and into higher order thinking skills, like critical thinking and innovation. And then Fink's taxonomy of significant learning is an educational framework developed by L.D. Fink in 2003. And it defines learning as a process creating lasting transformative change in students by going beyond the mere cognitive knowledge. So unlike Bloom's taxonomy, it is interactive, it's non-hierarchical, it features 6 components as well, but they're essentially a web, an interconnected web of components that function in that way, and you can cross the web in various ways. So there's not a hierarchy to it. Okay, clear as mud? All right, so when we look at the first one, Bloom's has significantly evolved to meet our current moment. So we have the original, right? Most of us know the original 1956 version or the 2001 version, that classic staircase. And if you're unfamiliar with Bloom's, it's a great place to start in building your learning objectives and thinking about manageable ways to measure the impact of your programming. But it's the digital and the AI evolutions that I think really are impacting us today. So in the middle there, the digital evolution started in 2008. It allows us to track what I call digital assets or deliverables, things like curating, vlogging, collaborating. All of this is tangible proof of work that's being completed, okay? And all with an eye towards the digital. And then the AI evolution, which really, I think the first of them came out in 2025. There are a ton now, and I will tell you there are some that are way better than others, so be careful out there. But it essentially pushes us higher and higher. If we look at Bloom's staircase, it pushes us higher and higher in that hierarchy, allowing us to prove that we're teaching uniquely human skills and using AI as a tool to supplement and support learning rather than replace it, which I think is particularly important. You may see other Bloom AI taxonomies that are more about the student, but this is more about how we're using it as educators. And so I like to lean on that one. But sometimes we know that cognitive mastery is not the whole story, right? So then that's where Fink's taxonomy of significant learning comes in. If Bloom's is a staircase, we can all think about Fink's as a web. It helps me think about it that way. And Fink's isn't just about what learners know, it's about who they are. So you can immediately see the translation to theological education at this point. Fink's allows us to capture evidence that those basic course evaluations and spreadsheets may miss. Things like the human dimension, and that would be the yellow pie piece there. How learners have changed their view of themselves as leaders as a result of a learning experience, right? Or caring in the green pie piece there. How a learner's values have shifted or their commitment to the mission has deepened as a result of a learning experience. Maybe integration, the yellow one there, or integration is the orange one. The orange one there. How learners are connecting theological theory to the very real, messy challenges of ministry. So you can see how Fink's takes it a little bit further and starts to ask some of those really relevant questions to theological education. So I want you to think about these two frameworks as your primary currency for proving your program's worth, proving its impact and its relevance. Worth feels a little icky sometimes. So relevance and impact, okay? So I'm going to do this slowly in hopes that I don't lose you, okay? Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick these apart because then we're going to try our hand at it, all right? We're going to try our hand at working on a learning objective and scaling it up. So if we are asked to prove that our program is producing skilled leaders, then we're going to use Bloom's, okay? Because Bloom's taxonomy is about competency and skills and doing. So if you've got a board that you're meeting with and they're like, what do they know how to do? I'm talking competency-based education. Bloom's is your guy, okay? So you would show the assets, the deliverables, the strategic plans your students have created, the digital resources that they have curated, or the high-level analyses that they are performing, right? So this is the proof of that competency. That's how you use Bloom's. However, if you're asked to prove that your program is vital to the future of the church's mission, you likely want to use Fink's. You want to show the connections, the stories of integration, the evidence of deepened caring, the shifts in human dimension. That's where we get identity and being. Fink's is all about connection. So it's not one or the other. It's not that two polar opposites. They actually complement each other and they could actually speak to different audiences, okay? Both of these are exponentially better than just a satisfaction survey or even sometimes a course evaluation. They don't just say, hey, my learners really like what we're doing, or hey, look, our numbers are really big, or we're making lots of money. They say our learners are different now, and here is the evidence to prove it, okay? So do you all want to give this a try? You want to take an imaginary learning objective and try this out? I think you can do it. I'm going to imagine everyone's nodding their head. All right, so let's give this a try. So what we're going to do is we're going to draft what I call a piece of high stakes evidence for an imaginary course that we have to now meet with our boss about because they want to cut it because of budget constraints, okay? So what we're going to do is, as a team, we're all on the same team, we're going to rethink one of these existing learning objectives for the course and revise it in light of what we're learning about Bloom's and Fink's taxonomies, because we want to provide stronger evidence of the effectiveness of the course and the impact it's making. Is that clear as mud? Can you give me a thumbs up if that's making sense? Okay, excellent. Thank you. So, going to do this again. If we choose Bloom's as the currency, so we're going to do both. We're going to do it with Bloom's, and then we're going to use the same learning objective, and we're going to do it with Fink's. But if we choose Bloom's, our goal is to move from our students will understand X to they have created X. You see that? You see that there on the steps? We're moving up the stair. My students will remember X to my students have evaluated X. We're moving up that staircase, right? So let's say I had a course on social media for churches, right? Getting them in the digital age. My original learning objectives might be participants will understand social media for churches. Okay? We're gonna upskill it to participants will create a digital engagement strategy for the parish and produce a PDF strategy plan. You see the difference there? Big difference in what you're able to then provide to stakeholders about the worth of what's coming out of this class, how students are connecting. So you see where understand is, right? It's at the bottom under orange. It's low-level thinking, low-order thinking. We're revising it, giving it more tangible power and strength as pedagogical evidence by moving it up to create, which is right at the top, or evaluating something right there at the top. All right? So that's how we were going to use Bloom's. And so what we're going to do now, let's see. What we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and kick into our scenario. So I'm going to give you a case study, and I'm going to give you learning objectives. And I'm going to ask you to apply Bloom's. Okay, so for the next 3 to 5 minutes, use Bloom's original taxonomy with this sample learning objective. You're going to create that tangible pedagogical evidence. Okay, so here we go. I'm developing a new course called Mental Health and Ministry. And right now, all I know is that clergy are burning out at an alarming rate and need to take better care of themselves for the future of the church. One of my learning objectives is participants will understand the tools and resources that exist to combat clergy burnout. How can I use Bloom's original taxonomy to enhance this particular learning objective to show better evidence of the learners doing something because of this course and acquiring a new skill? Okay, so what you're going to do is rewrite that learning objective, drop it into the chat, and then pause, and then we'll waterfall them all at the same time. Okay. And when you're finished rewriting your learning objective and it's in the chat, ready to go, just put your digital thumb up on the screen so we can know that you're ready. All right, I'm starting to see thumbs. Excellent. All right. Anybody else really need more time? Just unmute yourself and say, not yet, wait for me. All right. I think we might be ready, you all. Okay, you've got that newly revised learning objectives in the chat. 3, 2, 1, go. Let's see them. All right, everybody look into the chat there and check out what we've got.
There's some great ideas in there.
They're wonderful. This is great. All right. What sorts of universal observations do we have? Just unmute yourself and share what you're seeing briefly. I see a lot of the use of the word create, which is awesome. Like mission accomplished. Well done. What else do you see?
Everyone seems to be concerned with turning the learnings into something implementable for their lives or their context.
Karen says application. Yeah. Coincides with what Helen just said. Absolutely. I see the desire to really test this, not just talk to clergy about theory, but let them really test what's going to help. Rebecca says contextualization. Absolutely. One more observation. What do you see in this?
I like that there's a timetable for things, 6 months, 3 months, and so it gives people that guide and sense of a timeline of when they're hoping to accomplish this. Yeah, measurable.
Well said. Well said. Lisa also says measurable engagement with the content. Yeah, wonderful observations. Well done. Everybody gets a big A+ for that. So now we're going to move on to Sphinx. Okay. Sorry, my slides are not working here. Come on, you can do it. There we go. So now we're going to use Sphinx. If we choose Sphinx as our currency, our goal is to move from things like our students like the speaker to their missional understanding of the church has transformed because of this course, right? So it's a little bit different. We don't have actual words to plug in, but let's say we have a course on racial justice, okay? So an ordinary learning objective might be participants will learn from this session on social justice about the denomination's history, okay? It even sounds boring, folks. But if we upskill it, if we use Sphinx taxonomy, maybe it would sound something like participants will integrate their own intercultural experience with the denomination's history of racial justice and create a 2-minute recorded video reflection of the impact it has today. That is totally different game, right? Very tangible, lots of identity, and huge implications for current reality. So it's relevant. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing. Now I want you to look at Sphinx. Do you see where will learn would fall in Sphinx web here? It's not quite as easy, right? Because it's just not individual verbs like it was before. It's a little bit more nuanced than that, but it's under foundational knowledge, which is that purple pie piece. So if you see how it's compared to Bloom's taxonomy, it's lower order thinking. It's basic. It's just like understanding at the bottom of the staircase. So we're going to revise this learning objective to make it more tangible by moving around Sphinx web to the left, counterclockwise, clockwise to the other side. And we're going to ask learners to engage their identity by doing things like engaging the human dimension, the yellow pie piece, by asking them to integrate their lives into the lived experience, into the denomination's history. We're going to ask people to integrate their ideas. We're going to ask people to inquire more deeply. Okay, so we're going to move away from the purple and pink, and we're going to move towards the blue, green, yellow pie pieces. And we're going to challenge ourselves to enhance that learning objective by moving away from those bottom stair steps that replicate Bloom's taxonomy. Okay? So do you need me to read the case study again, or are you good with just the learning objective? It's the same one. You're just applying a different taxonomy. All right. So take your time on this one. This one's a little bit more difficult. Type it into the chat and then just pause and we'll share together. And with this one, remember, it's like Bloom's. You want to have a tangible, deliverable, something identifiable that shows transformation related to identity and being. All right, give me a digital thumbs up if you are finished and ready to press enter. Give me a little thumbs up there. Or you can give me a real thumbs up. I like real things too. Awesome. Take your time. Thank you, Jill. I see that thumb. If you're struggling a little bit, read what's in the pie pieces. They're learning about oneself or others in the human dimension. They're developing new feelings and interests and values under caring. They're becoming a better student or acquiring about a new subject. They're self-directing under learning how to learn. They're connecting ideas in integration. That may help you a little bit. All right, do I have any? I saw 2 thumbs before. Do I have any new thumbs? Give me a real thumb or a digital thumb if you're okay. I see new thumbs. All right. All right, let's start with what we have. And as you start to develop yours, maybe it's while other people are talking, that's okay. You can add yours. So 3, 2, 1, go. Drop those new learning objectives in. All right. Let's check this out. If you're having a hard time, just check out what others have and let them lead the way for you.
Lindsay, I'd point out Ryan's comment in the chat, struggling with whether or not this is a training issue.
Okay. Ryan, I would welcome you to say more about that. You can either unmute yourself or you can type it.
No, putting this responsibility on the clergy seems to ignore huge economic, cultural, sociological issues about why religion continues to decline in our culture. And so I'm not sure that giving another job to the clergy to now take care of themselves and present their own burnout is really, I'm not sure how much it's going to move the needle. I just think it hasn't worked so far. So I'm not sure that kind of refining the learning objectives here are really going to kind of get us where we need. I'm also wondering, like, more in terms of blooms, but in one particular class, how many levels can we expect learners to progress? Can we expect them to go from understanding to create in a few sessions, a semester long course? I mean, how does that all kind of connect? But yeah, I think we're in a much bigger problem than clergy burnout. And I think that's a symptom. It's not part of the problem. So if we keep addressing symptoms, we're not going to kind of get where we need to be. Sorry, I know it's sophomoric to question the premise, but
you know what? It all matters. It all matters. And it's hard because the task of trying to make these things deliverables can feel very icky. It can feel like we're commodifying what we're trying to do with our students, right? And really what we're doing is we're trying for transformation, but we're also trying to help them produce and show evidence of transformation so we also can continue these programs for them. So it's not for our sake that they create them, it is for their sake. But we're talking about how we then use that in this commodified way. So that can feel icky as well. But to your point about blooms, Ryan, I don't want to undervalue the importance of understanding. Even though it's a lower order thinking, it's a trajectory that we're on. And so sometimes we do need to start there. But within the life cycle of a course, you would hope someone would step up all of those steps, right? You would hope they would move from understanding to creating, depending on how long that is. Maybe not in a webinar, but hopefully in a 6 to 12 3-month class, something like that. They're going to move through all of those dimensions. So thank you for your comment. I think it's very important that we understand that. And if it's okay with you, I'm going to run back to the chat and start looking at these. All right, folks, what do we see in the chat? Ryan made a great observation that is worthwhile and important to consider. Somebody else, what are you seeing in the chat with these revised learning objectives? One of the things I see relates actually, Ryan, to what you said is people are talking about, they're creating learning objectives that not only help them address their own self-care, but then also perhaps as a result of the self-care, producing a model that could help others, which I think maybe addresses or speaks to your concern, but also could be a transformative model. Lisa says they're more ambitious and will require more front-end planning and engagement. Yeah, they're big, they're lofty. Good point. Anybody else? What are the observations that you see here?
I think a savvy program would take into account Ryan's concerns, meaning that we're trying to work with people who have limited agency within the system. But that to take responsibility for the places where they do have some agency. And then perhaps what that can do is move the larger bodies that create the conditions of limitation to think differently about what they're doing and behave differently.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Well, as we move ahead and we think about the ways in which we can enhance our learning objectives, and to Ryan and Lisa's point, the ways we can enhance the way that we both equip but also empower current clergy and clergy to come. Once we have these artifacts, these assets, these deliverables, we have the vlogs and we have the curated list, and we have video reflections. What do we do with them? How do we actually use them? This is where we move from the role of designer to the role of director. You know, we've been talking like instructional designers for the last almost hour, but now we're talking about the directors that we are. So in degree granting programs, the currency they often use, and don't really have to do a lot to get that, that's formulated by the institution, is a transcript, right? It's an easy standardized way to say learning happened in this class, but we don't get that. In non-degree programs, that transcript doesn't exist, right? So instead, we have to use more powerful evidence. We have to use what we have at our disposal to show the same worth and value. And that is something I call the evidence portfolio. And there it is. It's journal entries, video reflection, new resources, curated lists, these tangible things that we can show that move beyond the sentiment, move beyond, hey, we had a lot of people at that webinar, or, oh, people really like us. They keep coming back often, to take our stuff. So this way, when we have an evidence portfolio, when we go to the boss or the board or the judicatory, we know enrollment and people signing up for things is a thin metric, but now we get to tell them something more than we're popular. We get to tell them that we're effective. So that being said, we're looking at pedagogical evidence. That's what we're talking about here, is creating pedagogical evidence by creating very specific learning outcomes that produce something in the end. It moves the conversation from how much does this lifelong learning program cost to, wow, look at what this department is doing. It changes the conversation. And this particular approach, it works because it has these particular values. It proves mission fulfillment. It shows you aren't just filling seats because you're forming congregational and community leaders. If you are delivering exactly what the denomination in the school said they want in their broader mission statement. So you're proving you're part of that fulfillment. It also justifies your expense, right? People want transformation, not just information. We can get information off of YouTube. We can get information generated by AI. But transformation takes place through intentional programming, and that costs money. But then maybe it even neutralizes budget cuts. That would be my hope. If it could neutralize some of these budget cuts to lifelong learning, because it's incredibly difficult, in my opinion, for a committee to cut the budget of a program that can point to tangible, high-level proof of transformation. It turns your learners into your greatest advocates, because their inner work and their outer production is the proof of your success. And that can feel a little icky, but if in the end it's all to generate it right back to the learner so that we can continue these life-changing programs, then we see the ends meets the means. So we started today with this question, right? My hope is that if you didn't answer in the positive, maybe you're shifting towards positive now, and the examples of your colleagues will help you maybe move in that direction. Because financial numbers tell our stakeholders that you're efficient. Satisfaction surveys and course evaluations tell them that we're liked. But Bloom's and Fink's and the digital evidence they produce tell the powers that be that your department is truly indispensable. And when you can prove that your learners are creating, Bloom's, caring, Fink's, in ways that directly advance the mission of the church, then you aren't just a continuing education or lifelong learning department, you are the future of the church. And another way that you can get more encouragement, like webinars like this, is by joining Alum. And if you're not a member of Alum already, I would encourage you to join this incredible group of people, because the way that we grow and learn is by sharing with each other. So I'm gonna stop talking now and see what questions or thoughts you all have. Anybody, thoughts or reflections?
The title of the webinar was Doing This in an AI Age. And what you seem to have done with both of these taxonomies is push people towards, as you mentioned at the beginning, the uniquely human outcomes of a learning experience as you go higher up the food chain, if you will. Can you say a bit more about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Who was it? The Department of Education and the Labor Department today just put out a framework for demanding AI literacy in higher education all the way down to community colleges. So it's unavoidable in a sense. And it's also got its issues, right? I mean, we were talking before we began, Helen, Lisa, and I, about how AI has formed its own religion. The bots talk to each other and form their own religion. That's not to say that there aren't effective ways that we can do it. But I think what I continue to be compelled by is how when we get back to what makes us human, that is when we are at our absolute best. And if we can look at technology as the tool that it is, rather than a replacement for who we are or how we think, then I think we're using it in the way it was intended. And I think that we'll find less people getting in trouble with its use and more people really kind of maximizing the potentials of what we can be as human because of it. So it starts at the beginning, I think, with the way in which we design our courses. But I think if we can kind of plan with the end in mind, then perhaps we have what we need to also kind of put up a good fight for our programs and ensure that those who are looking at all kinds of complex realities remember that these are transformative programs that are absolutely needed in theological education.
I appreciate that it's pushing lifelong learning continuing education programs beyond knowledge acquisition, which is, I think, where many people begin thinking about their programs, or as we unflatteringly call it sometimes in our shop, edutainment, meaning that as long as you've got something that's interesting and puts cool stuff out there and gets a lot of interest, it's somehow adequate to its purposes. And I appreciate you challenging that.
I think sometimes that's why people come. They want to fill a hole that they've found either in employment or just their own knowledge base, or they want to learn a new skill set. I think that's fine if that's how they come to us. But if they leave with only that, then I think maybe we haven't done our due diligence. They should leave transformed. And that's one of the things I love about lifelong learners is honestly, they're pretty good at identifying when something's changed because they come with that self-motivation. So yeah. Anybody else? Thoughts, feedback? Okay, great.
We've just got 1 minute left. If anybody has any last thing they want to say and feel shy about unmuting, go ahead and plop it into the chat. I'll take this minute while you guys are figuring out if you've got a last question to again thank Lindsay for being here and for walking us through just a really good basic description of blooms and finks. This has been terrific. I knew blooms, did not know finks. So I learned something here as well. We've got a similarly orientating webinar coming up on March 10th at 3 o'clock. We've got Tay Moss who will be in the house talking about adaptive versus technical change. You've probably heard those buzzwords before, but what do they really mean, especially in the context of lifelong learning? Looks like you've got lots of comments that thanking you for your presentation in the chat. And I think with that, we'll go ahead and bring this to a close. Again, Lindsay, thanks. And for those of you who are not already members of Alum, consider joining us. We're pretty good company. Take care, everybody.